So what we're talking about, we have a kind of main selection of prospects or clients that we end up working with, and they typically fall into a few categories. And kind of what we're trying to address today is, if you could boil it back to the essentials, what are the typical approaches that we take for content, depending on size of the business, level that they're at, with adding content into their kind of like web strategy, if you like. So probably one of the most common ones with the bigger clients is you have a large e-commerce site that is already pulling revenue through organic and other channels, but they are doing it largely just through like a shop area. Their content game is pretty weak. They have like product descriptions that they're probably pulling from the manufacturer pages. They maybe have some category copy, and then it kind of stops there. If you go to guides or the blogs, it might be like top 10 things that we sell this year, and kind of pretty rudimentary level content, if anything, but largely not at all. We get one of those clients in, they are, say, lower to mid market, and they've plateaued and they want to lift off again. What do we do? How do we go from there?
I think, to be fair, the first thing to kind of touch on from what you've said is, like, ultimately you might even get kind of top of market brands who've always been top of market, who face similar issues, who come in, so they might be performing kind of really well, but seeing the rest of the pack getting closer and closer and closer, and it's like warning signs. Wait a minute, we are such a bigger brand than all these others, so what is it that's going wrong? And typically it is content. So I think really for those top of market brands, whether you're still top of market or whether you've kind of dropped down, clearly if you've dropped down, you're getting in touch with us because you need to get back there. But there are quite a number of brands, particularly kind of now, who we've got on the books, who've been quite clever about recognising, wait a minute, those wolves behind us are getting closer.
They've seen the blue tortoise shell kind of flying by, and it's come up on their HUD.
Yeah.
They're about to get smashed.
Exactly. I think in terms of our first approach, really, like, ultimately it centres down to the audiences that you are selling to and that you are trying to target. So those big brands are usually selling a quite wide range of product, and also probably they've got a kind of wide range in terms of pricing too. So the very first step is identifying what are the areas of the site that are going to be affected most by content. So yeah, you might be able to see that shell in the background, but do you know actually who's driving that cart, and do you know what kind of approach they're taking? What we do is we will dig into those players who've seen the real kind of rises, and we recognise these in the reports that we produce kind of yearly. We dig into those and we try to reflect upon the fact of, okay, how are they seeing such a massive increase compared to the market? Normally it is content, and typically it's consideration content is the first one. So I'd say for big players, understanding what the problems and questions that your consumers have around your product sets is the first port of call. Like, go and identify whether it's from records of people ringing up or whether it's from kind of low bounce rates on certain categories. Like, try and understand what is it that these consumers are having to ask and not having that answer presented to them on your website or within the buying experience. That could be anything from you don't provide products at the right price, or you don't push through to kind of cheaper products on different categories, but it could also be very question and answer informational. So say for the kind of beds and mattresses space, people might come in through a mattress search and then be presented with pocket spring, temper, memory foam, but ultimately what does that mean to me? Like, these are just words, I don't really understand. How do I choose between a memory foam and a pocket spring? You ultimately need to be able to answer that question. So we'll identify what those problems are really, and we'll kind of try and map that back to a user journey. So we'll look at category landing pages where there's a high bounce rate, or where there's kind of not much revenue coming in but a lot of sessions, and that's a red flag. Wait a minute, people want these products, or they think they want these products, or they've arrived through a journey to this page, but something is stopping them from making that purchase. Usually that's an answer that they've not received. So we would go and create kind of editorial plans off the back of that, and we would hyper target it to those problems that people have. And then the kind of secondary part of it, once you've identified those problems and mapped them back to areas that you're interested in growing, is building a level of authority within the market on the kind of topics that somewhat sit around your product range. So using the bed and mattress example again, that would be sleep. Like, guaranteed across that website, a bed and mattress website, there is language like, for a great night's sleep, to improve your sleep, here's how you can get a better night's rest. If you don't have content that actually talks about how you can get a better night's rest, are you really an authority? Can you really be able to say that memory foam mattress will improve your sleep if you ultimately, your website does not prove that you don't know what bad sleep is? So I think it's, the way that I talk about it with clients is, I really like the idea of looking at the language and lexis that is used across the commercial side of a site and trying to pull out nouns and adjectives and thinking about, do we cover these in more detail elsewhere? That's a very search ploy. That's like quite analytical and machine based, but map that back to users and you ultimately start to answer all of those questions, and you even start to answer questions that they didn't even know that they had. And even from the kind of more awareness side of things, we would ultimately look at, how to improve sleep, and then we would look at a mattress buying guide, and then we would look at the kind of category product. And I think ultimately it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I suppose. It's a pyramid. At the very top of the website, you've got these products that are on sale, but underneath it, you really need to kind of build that groundwork, I suppose. And I think if you can cover awareness and you can cover product-specific questions and category-specific questions, you're in a really good place. Then you've got a solid website, and ultimately you're serving users' needs. They shouldn't ever have to go off-site.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting points in there. Not that there were some uninteresting points, but it got me thinking around, because you're saying if you are looking at the whole language of the site and you're looking at guides, it kind of rolls into that semantic debate of SEO content or writing for SEO versus just writing or producing content having SEO in mind. It's a bit of a tricky conversation. It does my head in, to be honest, where people have this argument, because it just is an entirely semantic debate, and I think everyone knows really what the answer is. But there's that idea of thinking, when we're trying to improve organic performance, largely there's probably very few sites, right, where there is no product copy. It might be bad, it might be regurgitated manufacturer stuff, but we rarely see, you rarely go on a site and it's just a picture of a sandwich and $6.99 or whatever. I don't know where I shop from sandwiches. That was telling, wasn't it? Who goes on an e-commerce site for sandwiches? There's many things to unpick there. But yeah, when you get into that consideration level of content, there is that, what we're talking about, I suppose, in this conversation is we're looking at how to improve organic performance through producing content, but that in turn, if you are answering problems that a customer has, so not to go too kind of sucking eggs on it, but that is marketing, right? Go and figure out what problems that you're solving, and use that as your USPs and stuff. By creating that content in long form video, however we do it, you are actually also increasing, regardless of channel, performance of the site, conversion of the site, recollection of the brand. If you come at it through a homepage, funnel through to a guide post, or use the guide post as your organic landing page, you are then getting brand recollection, which is what everyone pays hundreds of thousands for to get that kind of brand recall up to Christmas. You're getting that just through presence and being the authority and answer to the question that someone has that leads them to buying that product. Definitely.
And I think that point around, is there a difference between SEO content, or do agencies like ours produce SEO content? No. There's no such thing. It's a bizarre question. It's a bizarre statement. If you're going to go and present to a brand a piece of content, like an idea or a topic that has no relevance to their products, there is nothing within that search engine algorithm, or that has no relevance to their users. There is nothing within how search works that says that there are pieces of content that are irrelevant to your audience which will help your SEO. Like, it's a bizarre kind of fallacy. Where you do kind of get the benefit, though, I suppose, of an agency is being able to identify which of the relevant topics have the most topical relevance to the products that you sell. Like, we dig into data and we explore that, and we do find that out. I think ultimately using the knowledge of the kind of the client, and this is what we do on a week-to-week basis, to figure out the kind of problems and where the areas they want to focus are, and that gives us the kind of the direction, and then we go and unpick from a kind of search point of view, how do we actually capitalize on this absolute massive range of topics and ideas, because pretty much every brand and every website will be able somewhat tenuously to link out to different topics and ideas. So I think a kind of search agency like ours, we can really identify what are the most important, what are the priority ones, where are you actually going to be able to serve users' needs massively, but also benefit the rest of the site. And ultimately, every piece of content that we do, outside of like product landing pages and category landing pages and the like, is centered around usefulness, I suppose. There is a point and there is a purpose beyond just somebody landing and reading it. That kind of topical relevance. It's such a big thing now. Like, there's so much talk about topical authority, and I find it quite bizarre that people have started using this word so often. Like, what were you doing beforehand? Like, talking around topics that you had no like room to be in. It's strange.
It's crazy though how agencies, like 99% of agencies did that though, right? And I think it was that whole idea, the going back to the SEO content thing, was born out of that era of SEO agency, right? Where you go, we need content. Okay, cool. We're going to do some keyword research. We're going to pull loads of keywords, and we're basically going to knock down from the top search volume levels and just go down because that's the priority order. And that completely failed to look at, like, again, going to, like, there is you as a category of product that might solve a particular thing. So if you're maxi like running shoes that offer support for people, you know, someone's got a gammy leg and they need like cushion shoes, there is, like, you're in the running shoes business, right? So there's loads of questions and keywords and things related to running shoes. But, like, specifically if your brand is all about, or maybe a better example is like all the Vivo barefoot and those, like, the minimalism type shoes. Yeah. Within your category of shoes, there is a substrata of keywords, questions, problems and answers that you over-index on in terms of USP, in terms of hopefully, like, your whole brand has worked towards that being the thing that you're particularly good at, right? So in what you'd think of as a sane marketing world, we'd look at just like every keyword. You know, I'm sure loads of people Google dog every month kind of thing, but it's not that relevant to us. So you'd hope that we're going to go, okay, we're really going to hone in on the stuff relevant to minimalist shoes, and because that's the most connected to our brand, and let's kind of forget about just the potential search volume out there kind of thing, and just go from try and match the two together. Like, there is interest, there is something related to our product there, do that.
And there's a journey in between the two. There's a point for the consumer where they can accurately make that, like, link. If you've got a piece of content that a consumer probably can't, someone lands on the website but can't make a link back to your product, get rid of it. Send it away. Like, there's no need. There's absolutely no need. Now, ultimately, if you get to the point where you're starting to build content to a proper depth, then you can start touching on kind of more tenuously linked ideas, because you can have like an awareness piece that's quite far away from your category, but if you've then got like another awareness piece that is slightly closer, and I think ideally what you want to be doing with content as a large brand particularly is getting that consideration boxed, nailed, make it work, slot it into the user journey. but then branch out and be fun and like find titles that are awareness based and might not be overly linked to products specifically, but they are within the realm of the interests of your audience, and you can start building awareness. And there does need to be some form of link back to a product at a very kind of broad level. And I think ultimately, like what we do is every year, well, not every year, every Monday, to be honest, we plan on a Monday. We will look at those titles and start to go, this one's worked, this one hasn't, there's engagement with this topic, and we'll learn and kind of be quite malleable, I suppose, and quite flexible, and go, right, okay, we're seeing engagement here, let's explore this in more detail. And I think that's important. Like, don't ever stop producing content, but always make sure that the content on your site is lean and is working and is useful. But I think one of your phrases is throw it at the wall and kind of see what sticks, and there's a slight value in that. Granted, what you're throwing at the wall needs to be slightly considered, but we've seen success off that, haven't we, where we've identified a topic, we've identified the kind of the more blog-based titles off the back of it, and we've gone, okay, cool, let's write, I'll use the bed and mattress example again, let's write about how the moon affects your sleep. And then that's quite an interesting, fun thing, and ultimately that also gets picked up by kind of press, and you start gaining backlinks and branching out that awareness. It's a big thing, I suppose, content strategy for a big brand. There's a lot to dig into, but priority and focus, and with a couple of wild cards thrown in.
Yeah, you've got to have the wild cards. I think for me, yeah, there's a couple of different kind of fundamental approaches to it, right? So if in this example we're talking about a bigger e-commerce site, you could assume perhaps they're going to have at least a somewhat decent SEO budget, or however you want to categorize it, budget to be contributing to content for whatever sake. You've got basically two ways in my head you can effectively spend that money. The first one is you agree some kind of time frame, which is where it often falls down because stakeholders want a return faster than is really feasible. So you can say, okay, we're going to start this whole content business. We're going to branch beyond the e-commerce shop. 1 to 2 years, say we want to start putting traffic goals, and where we want to see some return in things like links, visibility, traffic from the awareness or consideration content through to the shop, i.e. revenue. That's when we want to start seeing those kind of markers of success. If you've got the foresight and the patience to agree on that slightly kind of further deadline than I know for a fact a lot of people are willing to give it, I think then you're afforded then the luxury of being able to do that extensive research part of things, where you can go, here's a search volume versus here's our USPs and where we really fit into that, and you can work on then, because bearing in mind, if we're pulling search volume on it, somewhat already exists on it, right? A lot of this is already going to exist on the internet. So the hard bit there, once you've got past the stakeholders wanting returns in 3 months, the hard bit is then to actually stand a chance of achieving something with that content. Yeah, if you're established, you might have a little bit of authority behind you to jump the queue somewhat, but really you're daft unless you're trying to make the best version of that exists already. Like if you're Googling, I don't know, like how to stop shin splints when you're running or something like that, you go on, I guarantee there's going to be like thousands of articles on it. And if you go and see the top ones at rudimentary level have 30 ways to reduce shin splints, and you go and produce a top 10 list, it's not a great start. So that's then the next challenge, right? Trying to see in the big picture, going, we've got X amount of time, we want to go in and we want to be the best at all of these topics, answering questions and making that content navigationally succinct in kind of converting to email, product, revenue in whatever form.
Definitely, and I think a really important point on that as well is identifying like a unique angle, like bringing something new to the conversation. I think we're all somewhat fatigued with top 10 of this, top 10 of that. Like, I think we've all got to a point where we recognise this is not the top 10. This is just the top 10 things that one person who wrote the article found. So I think if you can provide unique angles onto that kind of those types of titles and identify that within the kind of within the title, within the target. And so the best way to do this, and this is quite difficult to be honest, we face this as a challenge with a lot of brands, the best way to do that is to go first person, is to have somebody that can talk through those top 10 who's had direct experience. Ultimately, you're never really going to be able to do every single piece of content like that. So how do you find the unique angle, or how do you suggest a level of trust and authority that is unique to the rest of the SERP? So at that point, I would be looking at things like maybe a review panel. Can you get kind of experts involved who on a quarterly basis will go through your top performing posts or your middle performing posts, probably add a level of review to it, you service that on the page, you talk about it. Even more simple than that, if you don't have the budget for that, an editorial policy, an author profile, links through to other relevant content, source quotes from experts through kind of online services like Harrow, where you can just throw a kind of PR request out, get proper insight into the topic. And I think ultimately once you start doing that, you set yourself apart from the rest of the crowd massively. And that is a focus of kind of search engines as well now, like being able to really prove that trust. But ultimately, I don't think the experience part of the algorithm, the EAT, is massively focused on editorial and kind of inspirational. I think it's a little bit more about kind of trust. So I don't think you need that first person experience for every article, but really consider how you can provide levels of trust and provide unique angles, I think. And that's where it gets fun. Like, that's where the fun is. I don't really want, as a content creator, to be looking at 10 different results on the SERP and going, okay, how do I amalgamate all of these? I want to apply some common sense and some thought and a bit of analysis to it. And that's where conversations happen that lead into further ideas as well. So I think it's really important to, have personality, I suppose. Have a bit of personality, have something about you, make sure that your content is speaking to the right audience, is speaking in the way that they engage with, and is providing them things, your audience, not the market audience, your audience. Provide them with what they're after, use the language that they're interested in, and you will ultimately see better engagement, and that means better rankings. So I think it's quite key. Own your space.
Definitely.
Yeah. I suppose it gets a little different if it's maybe a brand that don't have as much clout as a top of market brand or a kind of mid to top brand, and normally those sites are kind of newer to market and maybe they don't have as much of the knowledge around what their audience needs or what their kind of product range could eventually be. The approach changes slightly if it's a kind of maybe a new Shopify site. It's got a load of products on, like you said before, product descriptions are just straight from the factory. That changes the game a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that the fallback of that kind of, I've got a 2-year plan and we're going to measure towards the end of that. The setback of that is, with your kind of Shopify guys, your newer businesses. I'd probably say like generally, particularly if they're like newcomers to the market, they sometimes have a much stronger idea of they're like got this disruptor kind of mindset thing. They've seen the Gary Vee videos and they've really nailed on their USP, and because they're coming into an established market, they've naturally had to think about that kind of where do they fit in and why am I coming along now. The disadvantage they've got when looking at that kind of long-term content strategy is that they're often funded externally, so they've already got investors who right off the bat are wanting to see green shoots in 3 months and money in the bank at 6 months. They've got much shorter time frames. Naturally, if they're working with agencies or freelancers or looking to hire, they've got less money to play with, right? Because that, if they're funded or otherwise, if it is kind of bootstrapped, they've got to make that money work harder in a way because there's less margin for error. So that approach can often just, for a lot of guys, just seem too scary to even entertain the thought. So the kind of the plan B, which sometimes I prefer, to be honest, is a little bit more exciting, is to kind of maintain that disruption kind of model, but apply it to your content. So you can still do, if you want, some kind of quicker keyword research, but I'd almost say for this method it's not entirely necessary. I think what's much more important is, like, you know, if they've got that really good idea of like the USP and why they're different, why they're good, just like brainstorm around that and literally go, what are the interesting talking points? Like, why is it interesting? So to use a non-product example, like Universal Analytics to GA4, like why it's interesting is because some of the stats aren't replicated across it. So it requires a mindset shift when you're moving over to that, right? As a decision maker in marketing, that's an interesting thought piece. So that we're dealing with at the minute as marketers, providing that as a service. I don't need keyword research to tell me that that's interesting. Like, because I'm in it, I know it's cool and it's interesting.
And
because
on
I'm
that
there.
point, like, quite literally the one that jumps to mind for me with that, and this is getting quite GA4 versus UA heavy, but like the removal of bounce rate, so, and the push towards engaged user versus disengaged user.
That's what I was talking about, yeah.
Yeah, so a piece of content, you don't need keyword research to write something along the lines of what is the difference between bounce rate and engaged user, or how do I track engagement that's kind of users landing on a page and disappearing within 10 seconds on GA4. Like, these are questions that we can ideate now and we can produce. There's no volume around that because it's not happened yet, it's about to happen. But you go 2 years down the line or 1 year down the line, every copywriter under the sun and UX specialist under the sun is probably going to be searching for this, like bounce rate in GA4, what is engaged user, like get ahead of the curve. And that's the beauty, I suppose, of what you're saying, that approach. Focus, identify like your audience and your topics, and look forward and like pull those kind of threads. Yeah. Map keywords back to it if you want, but if it comes up with zero volume keyword, if it's a good idea, don't avoid it, man. Like it's still it's right, go for it.
Exactly. You've not got as much budget. So on one hand, like you need it, you kind of need it to work, but on the other hand, like keyword research costs money, whether that's through time, resource, or fees. You're already spending some money right off the bat. So are you not better to just go for it on genuinely what you think is interesting? Like, if it doesn't work, at least you've had a good time creating it, and like some of them are going to work. And the advantage of that as well is because everyone's over here doing the keyword research bit, they're playing that game and they're kind of in the rat race, going off the data that everyone's got access to. You, and I know this for a fact because it happens all the time when we do it, you find stuff that there isn't that keyword research for, and it just blows up, and it's something even incredibly niche that you wouldn't think deserved its own kind of bit of content. But if you really go to town exploring that, you're interested in it, so it's quicker to do. You don't have to waste time doing the keyword research for something that, you know, that's all that's going to tell you is that people search it really often every month. It doesn't tell you how well search engines are going to respond to it in relation to every other bit of content out there. It doesn't tell you how your customers are going to respond to it in terms of how well it converts to something useful other than a thanks for all the fish and I'm off kind of thing. So that's why it's my favorite method. It's higher risk because, you know, if you're in it and you're fairly fresh into the whole concept of marketing and business, I suppose you might just get it horribly wrong. And what you thought was a great business model falls apart in front of your eyes when you start talking about all the interests and stuff, and it just bombs. But well, yeah, maybe that did you a favor early on, right?
I think on that though, like, it's not really. Ultimately, if like whoever you're working for, like you have a level of knowledge of that space and that industry and that topic. So the things that you find interesting and the things that you think are important probably are. Let's be fair, they probably are. So my point there would be that kind of potential to fail. It is there if you're not doing the kind of research. However, that's where like the benefits of this idea of SEO content, like it's not a thing at all. So the content that you are producing for your website, which some people might call SEO content, repurpose that. If you think this is an interesting thing, like repurpose it. Like if you've got the kind of UA to GA4 comparisons, make that into a TikTok video. Use that kind of document that you've created. Get someone to do like we're doing right now. Little office look at the camera there. But repurpose. Look to kind of use that content in other areas. So kind of go get across your socials, build audiences, get onto forums, like start throwing in, like identifying the areas and the audiences that are already speaking about this or are about to speak about this. Raise those questions. Like there are so many other alternatives than just putting the content that you produce on a website, on a blog, and thinking that's the be all and end all. Like no, that's the starting point. You've got so much wealth and kind of depth there. Don't stop. Like turn it into something else. Get it on LinkedIn, get it on your social channels, push it into forums, print it off, post it through someone's letterbox if you want. Like
send your nan a copy. Yeah, I think that you can use that to validate in some senses in lieu of keyword research as well, right? So if you, like we've done it before where one of us has posted something on LinkedIn which is like a 200-word short version of a concept, and like people have engaged really well with it. That's then like a thumbs up as far as your audience is concerned. Like if that smaller version of it has worked, you could do the same thing with like email. Like you could write a newsletter. So the Spark Toro guys do this really well. Amanda sends like a thought piece out as a newsletter. I don't know if those guys do the same thing, but they will get engagement stats from that piece of email content, right? All this could be used as indicators that you're still getting a direct return off that bit of channel activity, or if it's a social story or something like that. You can use that one as a kind of thumbs up. You can also use that to actually physically put in the bit of content that you're putting on the site or whatever channel it might be. And yeah, it just kind of it saves work, right?
Exactly. And the beauty of it as well is, I don't know how many agencies, SEO agencies would work in this way. I won't throw a number out, but I would assume that quite a lot of search agencies do use keyword research as their sole barometer of truth as to whether an article should exist or not. So that inherently makes that keyword list competitive. Like ultimately, if there is a volume for a topic or a keyword, there are going to be other people talking about that, targeting it. Who knows who they are? Do they have a better content depth? Do they have better relevancy? Do they have kind of experts writing about it? Like, you're basically jumping into a wrestling ring with a number of, like, aged Mexican wrestlers who know what they're doing. Like, go that kind of other way. Own your space. Look at what your users and consumers or service users would find interesting. I'd love to do a campaign without keywords, like totally without them, where you could literally just go, how do we serve the user's need and how do we talk to them about the topics that they like? A lot of keyword research helps with understanding that, so it would be difficult, but it would be interesting to see how you perform. And I think ultimately, like, a really big point here is the holistic nature of search. So I think one of the things that is not really recognised by people that work outside of search is how you can rank for sustainable clothing without having any page that has a H1 for sustainable clothing. The reason I know this, People Tree, whoever's there, well done, you're working good, whatever your market employee is. But ultimately, there's the website. Across that whole website is references to sustainability and is references to clothing. They rank for that well because they are the right brand to rank for that well, and they've not had to do keyword research and go, sustainable clothing has 37k's worth of volume. Like, they know that they sell sustainable clothing, and if they talk about it, almost like, not regardless of the targeting, because you really do need to, once you've actually done that, then join all the dots together. That's where you have to look at your site structure, that's where you have to look at your page speed, and that's where the technical health side of things comes in. And then that's also where kind of content from a search agency comes in to go, right, okay, these are the opportunities, these are the gaps, these are the things that you've not focused upon. But holistically, if you talk to your audience and if you talk about the right things, you will improve and you will see You will see where you need to go to. And I suppose my point, rather delayed, is if you focus too much on keywords, you'll gradually get further and further away from your audience, because you'll see a big shiny one that you think, oh, that we should be talking about that. No, you probably shouldn't. And that's my rant. Firm believer in this.